Hello, Beacon Heights students. I'm Mrs. Dale, and this is lesson number 5. To begin with, I'd like to sing a few Halloween songs. So get your singing voices out. Here we go. The first one is Halloween Cat, and then we will sing If I Were a Witch. Halloween cat, Halloween cat, why do you mew and mew like that? Neither I nor the moon like your tune. Halloween cat, Halloween cat, Halloween cat, why do you mew and mew like that? Neither I nor the moon like your tune. Scat, Halloween cat. Okay, our second song is If I Were a Witch. If I were a witch, I'd laugh, hee hee hee. If I were a cat, I'd meow meow. If I were a ghost, I'd groan with my mouse and scare everybody now. If I were a witch, I'd laugh, hee hee hee. If I were a cat, I'd meow meow. If I were a ghost, I'd groan with my mouse and I'd scare everybody now. Very good. I hope you enjoyed those Halloween songs. There'll be more later. So far we have learned about 4 amazing composers: Mozart, Haydn, Beethoven, and Brahms. Today we are going to explore the life and music of a man named Robert Schumann. Do you remember that the Schumanns were wonderful friends of Johannes Brahms? Well, let's learn about Schumann now. He was born in Zwickau, Germany in 1810, the same year as Chopin. Remember the name Chopin because we will learn about him later. Robert Schumann's father was an editor and book dealer who encouraged young Robert to be interested in books as well as music. He began piano lessons at the age of 7 and studied Latin and Greek in school, developing a keen interest in literature and writing. Schumann continued to develop as a pianist and wrote novels or books. When he was 16, both his father and sister died. Schumann went on to study law at the University of Leipzig and Heidelberg University. Eventually, he gave up the law because he loved music more. When he was 18 years old, he studied piano with Friedrich Wieck and began to compose. 4 years later, he permanently injured his hand, working with a device that he developed to strengthen the 4th finger of his right hand. Schumann then devoted himself to writing music and literary works. He started a magazine called the New Journal for Music, in which he wrote articles and reviewed music and concerts. He particularly supported Brahms, Chopin, and Schubert. When Schumann was 30 years old, he married Clara Wieck, an outstanding pianist and the daughter of his former piano teacher. His marriage was a turning point in his artistic career, and his wife was a great inspiration to him. Schumann began to write songs expressing love for Clara. Together, they had 8 children. Schumann wrote for his own children a collage of 43 pieces called Album for the Young. Most of the pieces have descriptive titles, such as The Happy Farmer and The Wild Rider. Let's take a listen to Robert Schumann's piece, The Wild Rider. Imagine being on a horse. You can hear the galloping. That's it. It was like 1 minute. Now I'd like to move over to my cello and play the Happy Farmer. I hope you enjoyed the Happy Farmer with me playing that on the cello. So, Schumann's music has been described by these words: imaginative, whimsical, youthful, cheerful, fresh, and lively. Did you feel like that? Did you feel like it was lively? I did. In 1843, when Schumann was just 33, he was named teacher of piano composition and score reading at the new Leipzig Conservatory. The following year, he went with his wife, Clara, on a successful concert tour of Russia, where she performed many of her husband's compositions. In 1850, they moved to Dusseldorf, and he became town musical director. Robert Schumann died in 1856 at the age of just 46. I would like to read now Schumann from Famous Children by Anne Rachlin. The streets of Zwickau were filled with excited people. It was 1812 and the French army was marching through the little German town on its way to Russia. The sound of drums and marching feet filled the streets and the crowd began to cheer. Sitting on his father's shoulders, little Robert Schumann had a perfect view. "I can see the Emperor's carriage, Father," he cried. The Emperor Napoleon and his Empress smiled and waved to the crowds as their carriage rumbled by, followed by a band of musicians. Robert clapped his hands in the time to the music. When Robert went to bed that night, the sound of the band was still ringing in his ears. The next day, Robert pretended he was the Emperor Napoleon. "I need a coat, Ziff," he said to his kitten. Quickly pulling down his father's best coat, Robert put it on. It dragged on the floor, but Robert didn't care. Left, right, left, right. Robert marched down the street to his friends. "Attention," he called. The boys laughed at the tiny figure in the long coat dragging in the mud. "I'm the Emperor Napoleon," he called. "Get into line. Hurry up. Left, right, left, right." Soon the boys were marching up and down to Robert's commands. Later, as Robert was marching home by himself, he saw a group of travelers arrive at the inn. They would make a good army, thought Robert, and he ran over to them, shouting, "Attention! Get in there." Quick march! The travelers smiled but took no notice of the small Napoleon. Robert lost his temper. He marched over and hit one of the men with his stick. At that moment, his father came around the corner. Robert's father was furious. Everyone in Zwickau knew August Schumann's bookstore in the main square. Robert's rude behavior brought disgrace on the whole family. His father marched him home and sent him to sit in the punishment corner for several hours. The youngest of 5 children, Robert Schumann was very bright. He spent every spare moment in his father's shop reading. He liked poetry best, and every evening he worked to recite the long poems he had read with his father. He loved the music of the rhyming verses and never forgot a single line. It was the middle of the night. The house was quiet, but inside Robert's head the sound of music kept him awake. He tiptoed downstairs to the piano. He sat down and tried to pick out the notes of the music in his head. He couldn't find them. Tears began to trickle down his cheeks as he realized he did not know how to play his own music. Mrs. Schumann woke her husband. "Someone's crying," she said. Edward, Carl, and Julius were sleeping peacefully. So was Emily, but Robert's bed was empty. They hurried downstairs. There was Robert, tears streaming down his face. "The music, Mama, I can't find the music." Gently they took him back to bed and tucked him in, saying, "You can try again tomorrow, Robert. Now you must go to sleep." "Perhaps Robert should have music lessons," said Mr. Schumann. Mrs. Schumann was doubtful. "He might want to become a musician, and then he would always be poor and hungry." "He must do what makes him happy," said Mr. Schumann. I'll talk to Johann Kunsch tomorrow." So Mr. Kunsch, the organist, began teaching Robert to write music down as well as play it on the piano. Robert was happy. Whistling down the street with Ziff nestled inside his jacket, he saw his friends. "We're going to sail our boats. Do you want to come?" they asked. "I'll get my yacht," cried Robert. The fleet of toy boats struggled in the vast flowing current. "An army has a general, a navy needs an admiral," announced Robert. "Admiral Ziff will take command," he declared, and put his terrified cat on the deck of his tiny yacht. The boys cheered. The happy cries of the boys turned to groans of horror as the strong current carried the little boat away, so quickly that it was soon out of sight. Robert and the boys searched and searched. They found the boat, but the cat was nowhere to be seen. Robert went home in tears. Every morning, Robert thought he could feel Ziff's warm body at the foot of his bed, but when he opened his eyes, they filled with tears. Ziff was still missing. One night while Robert slept, a tiny, bedraggled, scruffy black cat climbed in through Robert's window. When Robert awoke up, he thought he heard purring. He stretched out his hand and felt the warm fur. Ziff was back. One evening, Robert and his mother went to a concert in Carlsbad. Robert was very excited. As the famous pianist Moscheles gave his recital, Robert clutched his program tightly in his hand. He was spellbound. One day he would play the piano like Moscheles. "I'll never forget this night," he whispered to his mother, "and I'll keep my program forever," he murmured, and he did. Not long afterward, Robert and Mr. Kunsch were waiting to go on stage. The audience was seated and the singers were on the platform. Robert's mouth was dry, his first public concert. No wonder he was nervous. Robert walked to the piano. Mr. Kunsch gave the signal and Robert began to play. The music was very difficult, but he played it perfectly. The next day, everyone was talking about Robert Schumann. The people of Zwickau were so proud of him that they invited him to give a concert all by himself. "I won't play on that terrible piano again," he told Mr. Kunsch. "I must have a good piano if I'm to play in public. Mr. Schiffner was a wonderful piano. I'll borrow his." "What makes you think you can borrow my piano?" Mr. Schiffner was astounded. "I play well, sir," replied Robert, "but that piano of the hall is dreadful." Mr. Schiffner rummaged about in his pile of music. "Play this for me," he commanded. Robert stared at the music. "How strange, it was full of mistakes." "You did not play all the notes," said Mr. Schiffner at the end. "They are wrong on the music. I played the right notes." "Good boy," cried Mr. Schiffner. "You are a fine musician. You can borrow my piano." One day a package was delivered to August Schumann's bookstore by mistake. It contained all the orchestral parts for an overture to an opera. "Don't send it back yet, Father," pleaded Robert. "I want to perform it." Robert invited his friends to come to his house. One played the clarinet and two played the flute. There were 2 horn players and 2 violinists. "We'll give a concert," they said. Mr. Schumann's piano was very old and sounded awful. Robert's father listened to the boys rehearsing and decided to give Robert a surprise. When the young musicians arrived for their concert, they found a beautiful new piano for Robert and brand new music stands for the other players. "Oh, thank you, Father," cried Robert. "I'll work hard and make you proud of me." And he kept his promise. Robert Schumann became a great composer. Sadly, he damaged one of his fingers and was unable to play the piano, but he married a brilliant pianist, Clara, who played his music all over the world. They had 8 children. Robert loved children and composed a set of piano pieces called Childhood Scenes, including Night of the Hobby Horse, A Curious Tale, An Important Event, Child Falling Asleep, and the most famous one, Dreaming. And his book, his music Dreaming, is actually called Tremorai. And so we'll go outside now and we will dance to Schumann's music, Tremorai. Feel the air. I hope you enjoyed moving to the music of Robert Schumann. No composer before Schumann wrote for the piano more pieces effective for children, and it's because Robert Schumann had 8 children of his own. So I hope you appreciate Robert Schumann and all the composers we've been discussing the past 4 weeks. Thank you for joining me for music today. Until next time, take care.